Ah, sorry to be so tech challenged, Brian.
Oh no, it's okay. I just learned about this too when I was going to start doing this. I was like, oh, I think I know about this thing called Zoom, and then I just kind of did some research, and I don't know anything about computers or whatever, but I sort of figured it out through trial and error. But it took a while because I was like, what the fuck am I doing? So now I can just do this. It's not really as fancy as it might seem or whatever. But anyway,
Cool.
yeah. So well, thanks for agreeing to talk to me. I actually got a bunch of questions for you that 30 years later I always wanted to know. So
Awesome.
so
Now's the
thanks.
time.
Now's the time, exactly. People have a little bit more free time this year, so we'll start off by asking you, how's Santa Cruz? How's your year been with all this crazy? Our first pandemic year of as a nation and as a world. I know that you have a new band that you're singing in called Seized Up, and they just put out your debut album, the record label that it's on. And I'm sure that you had stuff that was planned for doing something. Uh, what did you have to sacrifice because of the pandemic situation that we're now currently swimming through?
Well, basically, my job, which I'm still technically employed at, I just can't work it, which is at the Catalyst in Santa Cruz. And the live shows, we got to play three with the new band.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I mean, Santa Cruz is a great place, but people have acknowledged it more than ever lately as being a great place. So they're just like swarming here in these just giant like hordes of infected tourists coming from places like, we started out in the pandemic wasn't that bad here, yet there was thousands upon thousands of people, swarming on Santa Cruz for this like newly found pandemic surf craze, which seems to be like the biggest surf craze since the emergence of like the Beach Boys and Frankie and Annette. I mean, it literally is like a global pandemic surf beach craze, and it's just out of control. I mean, you can't even walk down the streets in the anywhere near the surf spots. You go a few blocks inland, it's fine, but it's just so overrun with just the most idiotic people you could ever imagine from every imaginable place.
Oh
And
no.
it's been kind of a nightmare. It's been like, everyone's in town for the 7-day weekend, and it's just it's been like the 4th of July since March. I mean, every
Ugh,
day, day in and day out, like the worst tourist weekend you can imagine. So
that sounds horrible. But that does, you just inspired this imaginary song that the Beach Boys could be writing. Where's Brian Wilson? A pandemic surfer from Fresno.
he's around. I just read something about how he was mad because Mike Love's Beach Boys was playing the Trump rally or something. So he's around. Maybe it's time for him to step in and write the pandemic beach song.
Yeah. Pandemic surfers. Don't get sick. Stay away from morons. Fire beach. um, I was kind of curious. Were you born in Santa Cruz?
I was born in San Jose in 1964, and then we moved to Santa Cruz, Rio del Mar, when I was 5 years old in 1970.
Wow. Um,
So
and I could be wrong here, but I had this idea that you met most of the people, if not all the people, in the punk rock band MAD or Mad. Did you know those guys, Bill and Dave and Steve, in like junior high school or high school or something like that?
basically, I met those guys at the punk rock shows. Like when I was probably 16, 17, I started meeting, like, I think the first one that I met was Steve and Dave, and then Bill and Mike. And that was always up at the punk rock shows like 10th Street Hall and like Black Flag shows, Minor Threat shows, all those Mabuhay Garden shows, places like that. And that was primarily like the way that we basically got introduced was was by a mutual friend, Keith Meek. And he was friends with those guys. He called them the Sacto Boys. And they would come down here and you know, fuck shit up, like skate around and, you know, terrorize and just be punkers, you know. And that's how I kind of met them. And then they liked Santa Cruz so much that they moved here in 1980, I believe it was.
All right.
So, and then on my 18th birthday, I actually moved in to this, you know, 2-bedroom house, but we basically just all made like rooms out of sheets in the living room and stuff.
The typical young adult, typical
Yeah.
young home away from home scenario.
Yeah. So, and that was like, they both basically written or started jamming together at our friend Steve Iles's house, where me and Steve ended up living after this place. And like Steve's parents were always really cool and supportive and let us, you know, build like a makeshift studio in the garage. And so they were jamming there. And I heard the song Holocaust so much, like I just assumed someone else was going to sing, and I didn't feel like I ever wanted to sing or could sing. And then I just heard the song so much that I just wrote the lyrics to it and was just like, here, you know, you guys should use this. I wrote some lyrics of the song, and they're like, well, why don't you sing it? And I'm like, I don't, you know, I can't sing. I don't want to sing. And then I did. And then all of a sudden we became this, you know, kid band and started, you know,
How
like,
old were you? How old were you guys at that point? Was that like post high school?
yeah, I was 16, 17, and those guys were like 18, 19, you know. So, but yeah, we were all definitely really young. It was
Right.
just like basically straight out of high school, like those guys. Yeah, but it was pretty funny. Like all of a sudden, it just kind of, you know, I don't think any of us had the intent of anyone taking it seriously, but somehow I think we played a couple live shows, and then like Tim Yohannan and Jeff Bale saw us, and we're like, hey, you guys should be on this compilation, you know, Not So Quiet on the Western
My first
Front
my first
or
punk rock
Eastern Front or
hardcore
whatever it
compilation
was.
I ever bought. That's the first, and I didn't even know it was all bands from Northern California mostly. I was just like, man, a double record of all these bands. And when the Mad song came on, that was like the first. No offense to anything that came before it, but in the actual record itself, when the Mad song Holocaust came on, that was like the first. Yeah, this is really heavyweight. Who are these guys? You know, because you know there were some other things that were not quite as well put together, I guess. But that's how I first knew about you and those other guys, was because of that song Holocaust. They asked you to be on it, and did you guys get any interest from people? Did punkers write you letters or anything like that?
Yeah, everyone really liked the song, and that was just kind of the catalyst for forming the rest of the songs, none of which were as good. But another interesting thing about that song is when we recorded it and when we used to play it, like and when we if we were to play it to this day, we would actually include this middle part that used to go like, you know, like the part where it's like it's all a bunch of fucking shit. That just got put there because there used to be a part that goes down, now, 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 do 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 do, now, now, now. It was like a melodic kind of part that was interjected in the middle of it, and then it came back into the crushing part. But Tim Yohannan and Jeff Bale were like, "Oh, you got to get rid of that heavy metal part. We don't do heavy metal around here." Because that was a big thing in the early punk days. It's like, are you listening to metal? Like your friend would like call you up and bust you for like listening to Sabbath or Zeppelin or something. Be like, that's not heavy metal, I hear, you know.
The metal police.
But yeah, it was funny. So we eliminated that part and put in the, you know, it's like, okay, well, how about this? It's all a bunch of fucking shit, you know, and just
That's
off the top of my head, that's what happened, and that's how it stuck. But I always thought it was a bummer that they like regulated it to that point, because that part was really cool, you know. And it's we were just like young enough and dumb enough to be like, okay, cool, edit our song like that, where we should have just been like, fuck you, we're doing it this way, you know.
Right, like, well, we do want to be on this record, so okay.
Yeah.
I would have done the same thing. Yeah, Maximum Rock and Roll. Tim was always a really nice guy, and Jeff was nice. And after a little while, it was a very exciting magazine, but then when they, after a little while, it seemed like because they were very focused on this one thing, that whenever they would start reviewing questionable records, like when I remember they reviewed My War when it came out, and Tim wrote, "This sounds like Iron Maiden impersonating Black Flag," and it's like, well, you obviously don't know what Iron Maiden sounds like, because Iron Maiden
Yeah.
sounds like anything on My War whatsoever. So it became like, okay, well, Maximum Rock and Roll, if they say something is bad, it's probably going to end up being pretty good. Not all the time, but that's,
Yeah.
you
Well, I mean, it's still a great magazine and radio station now. I don't know if the
know,
magazine's still around, but at the same, I mean, those guys were great. They were like super cool people. They,
yeah,
you
they were
know,
totally good.
were friends of mine and stuff like that. But sometimes I didn't understand their whole like policies on kind of trying to keep punk music within a certain spectrum, like kind of,
Yeah,
I didn't understand that part.
yeah, but they were really nice people, and they were pretty inspiring for sure.
For sure. Yeah. And the fact that they took an interest in us when we were kids, that was awesome. But it was,
Right.
that was a fun time period. It didn't last very long, but
Were you guys around for like a year and a half, or something like that?
yeah, barely. But we
Yeah.
played a lot of cool shows. We played with the Dead Kennedys and we played with SSD Control. And, we definitely got around, played the city a lot. We were playing with a lot of bands like Crucifix and
Oh, I love Chris.
ALA and Revenge. Yeah. Yeah. So there is, still see him around once in a while. It's always great to see him.
Yeah, I love that album, man. That's like one of the best records of that era for sure. So when did so the band was probably over by the end of '83 or whatever, and I'm guessing, I don't know, but like by midsummer, the remain everybody in the band just started writing new material, and you brought your friend Mike in as second guitar player, and you built this band, which was going to be called Bl'ast, and that was that from like Chuck Dukowski saying, we're just going to blast and that kind of thing, like in like Ripper magazine or interviews like that?
It probably was actually I remember it was, it was MAD and it was the intention for Mike to move down at some point and join up.
Yeah.
And I had, in the meantime, kind of turned into a preppy and decided that I didn't want to be into punk anymore and was listening to a lot of, music like The Cure and The Smiths and Joy Division, and just got really kind of caught up in a lot of different stuff. It was like sort of a change of pace for me, and
Sure.
decided, like that too many of my friends had burned out early or ended up on the streets or on drugs. And I was like, I'm gonna, go to college in San Diego and do this other stuff. And so I was like, like turned into a preppy for a minute. And those guys would like, I was working at this place called the Shadowbrook, and I remember they pulled up and they were trying to get me to join the band again, saying that they were writing some incredible stuff. And I was like, sitting there in my Argyle sweater going, no, and I go, why don't you get my brother to sing? He looks just like me, And they actually did that for a minute. Like, I think he sang like
Dave, right? Is that his name?
yeah. He sang at a big skate party in Scotts Valley, and so they tried that, and then it was still the same thing. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Like, like sing these songs, like. And then they finally gave me a Ghetto Blaster recording of the whole Power of Expression without words.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like getting ready to make my plan to leave Santa Cruz or whatever. And I just listened to it and it was just life changing. I was just like, really? Like when I heard like Time to Think for the first time, it's like I'm getting the chills right now, because it was just so like, I was like, what is this? And then that just build up and that dun, 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 I was just like, whoa. And then I listened to, everything. And it was just my natural inclination to be like, start thinking of words to it and writing to it.
Yeah.
And I just decided that if I didn't do that, that I was just stupid, like to just deny that. Like what would I, have happened in my life if I didn't, stay here and do that? I mean, it probably would have been totally productive. I probably would have a lot of money, which I don't now, but for for the most part, it was just like, I'm like, I have to do this. This is incredible
Yeah.
music. And, I
Right.
didn't
Right.
want it to slip through the cracks. And and it was just an awesome time. It was like in that time period, I mean, we recorded right away. And
Yeah.
personally, I think those early demos are horrible. I like the fact that they're super slow
The
and
track
super crushing.
went to Track Records.
There was the track one, and there was another Fane one besides the Power of Expression
Really?
recording.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that there was just two versions. There's three.
Yeah, well, there's Bill Matoyer, which we hooked up with through COC, and we
Yeah,
actually the
I
reason
went
that
down there.
oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I watched you
Yeah, that
guys.
was the reason that was so slow is because it was after we played a gig that night, and we did it from like all night long afterwards. So it was probably super slow because we were so tired, but it sounds really cool that slow. But then it seems like by the time we recorded the Power of Expression, I remember people would comment like, "Oh, this is sped up a little bit and stuff." And
Yeah, it was. It was. It seemed like a more successful recording. I don't know. I don't remember what the track record thing actually sounded like, fresh from whatever. But the re-recorded Power of Expression record, it just seemed slightly more energetic, but not too fast. But definitely
yeah,
a little. It seemed like it captured it a little
yeah, I
better.
think it was the perfect medium. It was like, the slow parts were slow, the fast parts were fast. It just seemed like at that point, like that recording seemed to capture the maximum impact,
Hmm.
of that record, which was good.
Yeah, I saw I knew about you guys through being friends with COC before I actually saw you guys or met you guys, and they just were raving about playing with you guys on their Eye for an Eye tour, the first tour. That's how you met Corrosion of Conformity, and you guys carried on a very strong friendship over the years, where you guys played with each other, and they liked you a lot, you liked them a lot. And was that also the first show? Is that the show where you both bands played with Black Flag, where the infamous? We'll get to that story later, but where did you guys play with Black Flag, both bands?
Yeah, that was our second show as Bl'ast. And
Oh,
that
really?
was, yeah, that was like, so we've known COC since literally the very, very, very beginning, of
Yeah,
Bl'ast.
yeah.
And that was Black Flag, Saccharine Trust, Corrosion, and Bl'ast
That's a
at
great
the
bill.
the old Monterey Music Hall. And
Okay.
that it was cool. I mean, we weren't really like those early shows. It took a few shows for us to, we were kind of more shy. Like the sound was there and it was kind of turning into what we were. But as we progressed, like actually that week, like COC stayed at Dave Cooper's house and for like a week or something, and we just kind of invented these shows at this place called Club Culture and another place called
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah, like
Santa all the graffiti and stuff.
yeah, and I think that it was a place called Cha Cha's, and we just sort of invented these shows for them to have something to do while they were hanging around. I can't remember if they were broken down or if they just had time off.
Yeah.
And then when we started playing with them, that's when we seemed to really like form this bond of like, hey, we're both bands that are kind of different and radical. And we started kind of, I don't know, it started to get more aggressive and more
It was
like
heavier.
into the real like feeling of like, wow, yeah, we're confident. And, that confidence just sort of grew.
Right, right, right. Um,
And I see it as like a really pinnacle point in our lives is meeting those guys and maintaining this super long friendship with them. It's like
yeah,
it
that,
was some of the best moments you know in our lives is getting to like tour with them and hang out, and we were all good friends, and it was just like meeting people like you and just forming that kind of crew.
yeah,
But
meeting like-minded people. It's kind of hard for people that weren't involved in our time period. Everybody has a different time period, of course, but I mean, just even talking about that kind of stuff, it's I don't get a chance to really sit around and talk about what we all experience. So when it happens, it's kind of nice because it's like this, kind of this instant bond. There's like it's always comfortable talking about that stuff, not just for the idea of talking about. Remember those days when, but it was a time, and those times are why I'm here right now, I guess. So, so I totally understand what you're saying for sure. And also the first Bl'ast record, for that period where it's the five of you, it seemed like things kind of happened right away for you guys. I saw you guys in Ventura. No, it was Oxnard at the end of '84, and I walked in when you guys first started playing, and I was just like, I was just blown away. Like the whole presentation of it, the whole like both Steve and Mike playing the Dan Armstrong guitars and
Yeah.
Bill's gigantic fucking drum set, and just the whole presentation, and it was really cool, and it was just far beyond most punk rock, and I loved punk rock, of course, but a lot of even the band I was in, all the bands that me and all my friends had, it was cool and everything, but then when you saw people that really knew what they were doing, which is kind of how I felt it was when I saw Bl'ast, and this the whole presentation of it, and the volume, but not volume alone. Like it seemed like you guys knew exactly how you wanted to sound like, and it was really tremendous. And it just seemed like you guys started to get attention pretty quickly in the pre-internet, underground punk rock, hardcore, whatever kind of world. You're coming down and playing shows. Through Bob Durkee's One Two XU Productions. You were in Ink Disease magazine. There just seemed to be like this kind of swell, and people talk a lot about the whole Black Flag influence thing, but it's like, man, a lot of that stuff, to people that might use that as a criticism, were not around during that time, so it's like it's easy to listen to something and imagine what it was like, but back then there just wasn't a lot of people that sounded like Bl'ast, and it wasn't just Black Flag. It was like there was a lot of SSD Control in there.
Yeah, definitely.
You would like all Bill's hi-hat things, all those builds. There's a bunch of that stuff all over the first record. And Black Sabbath, of course, and a couple songs Mike wrote, like Nightmare, which is a fucking amazing song, all that stuff. It wasn't all just like, it didn't just sound like Black Flag.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of an early barrier to some extent, but I mean, basically, like the reason that things, happened pretty fast for us back then is because it's like, back then it's like bands just didn't have a lot of stuff out. And it's like if someone got a hold of a tape, I mean, that tape, you didn't know where it was going to end up. Sure. It was going to end up, everyone was, writing each other letters and like sending tapes and trading tapes, And I remember like hearing Minor Threat for the first time and going to see them in San Francisco, and it's packed. It's like it's sold out. Everyone's there. Everyone's like there to see this band that put out 1 7-inch, and it just didn't take a whole lot for people to get excited back then, and it was just really like when the Bl'ast stuff started getting passed around, all of a sudden it's like, oh, someone got a hold of this and you could play this show in Southern California. And then, it just kind of took off from there. And it's like with the Flag thing, it's just kind of like, I mean, we were total Flag heads. I mean, we were at every Black Flag show in the Bay Area or anywhere within a 100-mile radius of the Bay Area or Santa Cruz or whatever, and all the shows like Minor Threat, SSD, MDC, Crucifix. I mean, Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains. I mean, we were just wherever it was happening, seeing these shows. And, we would see a lot of these incredible bands like Code of Honor, a lot of really great bands, but then there was a lot of just like really typical kind of generic bands. And we just decided that we didn't want to be that. We didn't want to see that. We were sick of that. We definitely didn't want to be that. And it's kind of like where we just, we kind of fused that Black Flag SSD influence. And our goal was just to kind of take it into outer space and just, like start there, instead of having like an array of influences that were, but at the same time, it was like equally, as much as it was Black Flag and SSD, it was Sabbath and Iron Maiden. And,
it was different. I mean, it
like,
really was
different. Like Slayer, like all the early metal, like it just kind of like at the time, like I think that the thing that really was the definitive like aspect of really making us different was the fact that like when a bunch of kids get together and learn how to play their instruments, like why is one of those kids, you know, like Bill Torgerson, why is he just going to learn to play drums to the extent that he did? And, you know, it was kind of, you know, because you could literally tell him, like Steve and Mike would be like, whoa, like think about like a Maiden part or like a, you know, Sabbath part, like Phil's, you know, and he'd just be like, okay, you know, and just emulate that and do it. And he just came upon this style that was like to this day, like that, those early Bl'ast shows or, you know, the Bl'ast shows, and just Bill's style
Oh,
is
he's
just, I
amazing,
mean,
a fucking
he's
amazing
just one of
drummer.
the best in the world, in my opinion. I mean, he just has this incredible like energy and style, and that just really, that made the band as much or more than anything. It was just everyone's contributing element, but the fact that we had that drummer was just like, I mean, you couldn't really go wrong, you know. It wasn't our goal to emulate them by any means. It was just, you know, pick two of the, you know, or four of the best influences and kind of make this weird fusion, which is basically how all music happens, you know.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
sure.
everything's based on something that happened before to some extent, and everyone has their influences and their, you hear certain elements in people's music, you know, music about other things. And it's just like, I mean, we just wanted to form something that was just like carried that energy. The energy was just as important as the music. And I think that our energy, our stage presence, there
Oh yeah,
wasn't a lot of bands out there that were doing stuff like that. It was kind of like Minor Threat, SSD, Black Flag, Bad Brains, you know, that had that really manic, like over
there
the
was
edge
a lot.
live
There,
energy. And that's
there was,
why where I think a lot of people kind of make more than actually listening to the music, being at the shows and being like, oh, who do these guys think they are? They're, you know,
who do they think they are?
you over the edge, you know.
They think they're really good. That's what they think they are. I think they're really good too. Just like why would you have a problem with this? This is so stupid. Um, no, and the songwriting, I guess Steve was sort of it was kind of mainly Steve, but Mike had a couple of those fucking really good songs too for the material for the first record. It's like the songwriting, like what you said, it's like taking four things and like fusing it with this perfect fusion. And those guys kind of created this sound with Bill, of course, playing drums. And then lyrically, everything you wrote, and this is a hard thing to do in punk rock in 1984, 85, but your lyrics, for the most part, I thought, were very thoughtful. Like you were talking about things that were just a little bit more abstract and not just like Reagan sucks and whatever. Although you do mention Reagan in Nightmare, but your lyrics seem like you were trying to mirror the intensity of the music, but without cliches. Can you expand upon how you wrote lyrics, or you're just trying to write something that would complement the music as you saw it? Because I always thought you had a good head on your shoulders, and that your lyrics were like some of the better examples of, you know, if you're going to sing in a band back then, your lyrics were a better example of things than certainly kill cops and Reagan sucks and I'm going to kick you in the face kind of school of lyric writing for punk rock bands. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, the ultimate thing, you know, the ultimate inspiration was always the music itself, and trying to just, you know, it would just sort of evolve out of that. But it's like we kind of wanted to make songs that were more timeless, you know, and you know, songs like Nightmare, and there's certain songs where it's, you get that 80s like, you know, Cold War vibe all over the place, end of the world vibe, you know, but at the same time we didn't want to like pigeonhole the feeling to a specific point, you know, because like those lyrics could be equally or more relevant right now,
Right.
but we
Or
just wanted to make it more of a timeless vibe where people could use their imagination. It was kind of open to interpretation. They could kind of see it how they want to see it, and like not us just like barking some kind of preachy command down someone's throat, but
like
dwelling, yeah, dwelling on the relevance of the time period and trying to capture the intensity of the time period, but not in this pigeonhole kind of way where people could be like, whoa, what does this mean? I think it means this, but kind of just go and form their own opinion of what it is
Sure.
supposed to mean, you know?
Well, I did like that song "Time Waits." Those lyrics, "Time Wait." I get that's kind of a depressing sentiment. Like, oh, this guy really blew it. Like a cautionary tale. Don't waste your time. That's always how I took those lyrics for whatever reason.
Yeah, now I stand in the mirror and in front of the mirror and sing it to myself every day.
Yeah.
Just kidding, but
No,
yeah, no, I mean, yeah,
hey,
that
getting older becomes the alternative. You know? After the first album, you went on tour in the summer of '86, and then Steve abruptly left. And was it after the tour, and then you one more statement before you answer. You ended up getting William Duvall, who was known as Kip, who lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and was in this band Neon Christ. And I know that everybody was friends with Reed, the late Reed Mullen. What was the process going on where you did the first tour? Why did Steve quit? And how did William join?
well, the first tour was really fun. We did a good part of it, you know, like through the Midwest and out to part of the East Coast with JFA, and you know, a couple random shows on our own or with, you know, local bands here and there. And then we met up with COC and DRI and did most of the rest of the stuff with them. And I know when we played, I think when we played in Raleigh and Chapel Hill and stuff like that, I think we were kind of, we probably just played with like Honor Roll or something, or
You did. You played. They opened up. Yeah.
and but it was like, you know, that was all great. Our friend Scott Rogers from San Francisco was driving us and roadieing, and everything, you know, was good. And then there just started to be a slight rift where it just Steve, you know, I think Steve just at that point was kind of not that into it. And sometimes, you know, like if he didn't want to play a certain song, he could get kind of, you know, tantrumy and stuff. And it just got to a point where it just I don't know, it was just time for something different to happen. And it was sort of a mutual decision.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone just kind of agreed, including him, where, you know, like it seemed like there was about to be like a major fight between him and Dave, and everyone was just going to be like, this is it, you know, and Dave just, or Steve just goes, I quit, you know,
Yeah.
I'm leaving after this tour, and, you know, and so it was kind of, you know, it wasn't on super bad terms. It was just time for that to happen. And you know, for a while it was just like he was he was just starting to kind of get out of it, and we had to convince him, like, come on, do these shows, you know, do this. And then he started getting involved in other kind of music because he started listening to the kind of music that I was listening to,
Sure.
and he got more caught up in it, where it's like I love listening to that stuff. I listen to it to this day, but I would never want to play it. You know what I mean? But it was cool to be on the road listening to different stuff, you know, besides
Yeah.
just a bunch of punk and metal all the time. And so he got kind of more interested in that. And then he actually gave me a letter that he'd gotten from William Duvall. And it was just like, hey, if you guys, you know, ever need like a guitar player, let me know. I'm super into the music and would love to do it. And you know, it was just kind of like, he's like, here, you know, I got this letter. I wasn't going to show anyone, but he goes, you might want to check it out. And he just gave, you know, so basically the way that, you know, Will joined the band was through Steve giving us this letter, and we read it and we're like, oh, okay. And then we talked to COC and we're like, what about this guy, you know, from Neon Christ? And everyone, they're all like, yeah, hell yeah, you know, do that. So then we talked to him, and you know, sure enough, he came out there and he did that. And it was like, it was his first time moving out of the house. And so he comes all the way out to Santa Cruz, this crazy, you know, beach town in the 80s that was just full of that vibe, you know, the California surf punk skate vibe, you know. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, I mean, it had to be kind of overwhelming. I mean, for
Sure.
me to just like move, like if it would have been, you know, the opposite, and I moved to to Atlanta, at that time, it would be
Or a
equally
band, or
like, you don't feel like you have any real friends. You're trying to make new friends, and I was always, trying to like introduce him to people and like kind of get him into the scene. But it just, you could tell he was just a little bit, alienated from the whole scene and like missed his family, which is understandable, and was living in this room made of sheets. And, we had this housemate that was kind of hectic and, and it was just kind of, I mean, it was just, it was fun. And it just, he really like the fact that he came out here and did that, like at that age, like straight out of the house and just, it was definitely just the whole shock of like, wow, got to kind of fend for yourself. And it's not like we were really making any money at that point in time. Like, I mean, we kind of were, but it was just like we were playing a lot of cool shows. Like we played a lot of our best shows with him. That was, when we played with Slayer at the Olympic.
yeah.
Then the next night we played with like the Adolescents in San Francisco. And it was just like, I mean, we were always doing great shows with him and it generally just kind of worked out. It just got to a point where I think once again, it was like a mutual feeling. And, you know, I think Mike and Dave and everyone just kind of decided that they didn't need two guitar players, that Mike could just gate his sound and like have play through two rigs to kind of fill that void.
Yeah.
And at the same time, make it tighter. And so then, it was like I was always the guy that had to like break the news to people and be like, okay, this isn't going to happen, and blah blah blah. So I remember like having that talk with William and just being like, this is just where we're headed and where we're going, And it was like, there was a little bit of a weird vibe at that time, but not much. I mean, you know, it's like it was just kind of what it was, and then we had done the whole "It's in My Blood" record with him playing guitar on all the songs. Like there was a song that we co-wrote, like I wrote the words, he wrote the music, Poison, and then Sequel, which
Dr. Twain.
Yeah. Sequel was the best though. I mean that was really cool. And we did that. And then it's like outside of that, like all his tracks kind of got covered up by Mike doing new tracks that he wanted to do. And when we recently did this Blood thing, we uncovered all those and it was
Yeah.
really cool to like hear that. And everyone, including Mike, was like, whoa, and Greg Anderson was there. We're all sitting around in the studio and we're just kind of like, wow, that's insane, and everyone's like, you got to use, we have to put it out like this, you have to use this. So I'm just like, wow, and I was going like, God, when was the last time that I talked to Will? I think it's like we saw him on like one of the last tours when we played in Georgia and we hung out with him. And outside of that, I think it had been 26 years since I'd talked to him. And so Lou, like John Lewstad at the studio at 606 was just like, yeah, call him up. So I'm like, okay, so I'm like, hey, how's it going? This is Clifford. And he's like, wow. He goes, right on, man. And I kind of explained what was happening and he kind of gotten wind of it. And he's just like, wow. He goes, man, this is really exciting. He goes, definitely do it, and we're like, we'll give you full credit on everything, and like, we just think it should happen. And he's just like, wow, this is really, really exciting that, that Dave Grohl was taking this interest in it and that it was getting re-released and, and the whole deal. And he was just really behind it. And it was really cool at that time, he was going to be out in California in about a month. So I went and visited him over in San Jose the night before Alice in Chains was playing a show at the Shoreline Amphitheater. And then the next night, like he was cool and let us bring my friend Steve Isles' kid, who's like a aspiring young guitar player. So he got to go hang out and meet all those guys and stuff. So it ended up being really great. And I'd like to see him again. I had heard that he came through the Bay Area recently with his solo thing. And I was sorry that I didn't hear about it till afterwards, but it was a great time. It was a great experience. The whole thing with him. Like I said, I just can't emphasize enough, like for him to come out to Santa Cruz and be like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to leave my house. I'm going to move out of my house, not just in with some people that live up the street, but these people that
Yeah.
live in Santa Cruz,
No, that would
So
be
anyway,
that would be really tough. He was like 18 years old. He did a really good job. I only saw one show with him, but it was really good. And you know, one of those things. It'd be hard to move across the country when you're 18 years old, away from your family, to just join a band of people you don't
yeah.
know.
Was
You
the
know,
show that you saw, was that with the Mentors and Agent Orange at that Casa de la whatever in Santa
I
Barbara?
came. I came with Scott Radinsky. You know, it was just us, and I honestly don't remember who else played, but I don't think it was the Mentors.
There might have been Bad Brains and Dr. No at the
Okay, that was it,
community center.
because Dr. No played way too loud for their equipment. Yeah, all right, I remember that. Yeah,
Okay.
right. And yeah, that was the time I saw you guys. And then anytime afterwards, when you would come through Raleigh, it would be just as a quartet.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. So Take the Manic Ride. That's Dave's last record, and I think that record is has some of the best material that Bl'ast did. It's pretty experimental, and it obviously it sounds like you guys are trying to add other influences or just do something different, like getting away from whatever. Well, this is like Black Flag, whatever. There's it's kind of this weird record, and I actually kind of, even though I know the record's not supposed to sound like it does, I kind of, in some weird way, it just kind of adds to the strangeness of the material, because there's some pretty weird experimental, like guitar sounds, what Mike's doing, and you're trying different things. And the very last song is this tour de force of cool riff after cool riff after cool idea. What was going on when that was your second SST record? I remember. Oh, we never even
Yeah.
got signed to SST. We'll get to
Yeah.
that later.
Oh yeah. The way that we got signed to SST is, like I said, we just were living under the impression that Black Flag hated us. We were just their mortal enemies. They just despised us, when it was really just Henry, and I mean, maybe a little bit Bill Stevenson back then or whatever. But I mean, I think, we eventually became friends with Bill, and I think Bill at this point in time respects what we did, just for the sheer musicianship and all that. But it's like at that time, we started playing these shows, and Chuck Dukowski would be in the front row at every show, just right in front of us, with this really intense look on his face. Like he was just like, ah, but
Yeah.
he was there. And I just remember thinking wondering if he was there to assassinate us or something, because he
Kick
just
your
looked
ass.
so
Kick your ass.
intense, and then we started talking more and more, and he started being like, man, you guys were really onto something. I think it's really cool, and all this. And somehow it just came about. I think he was helping us get this, you know the power of expression back from Enigma Records, which kind of
From
wound up.
Uniform Choices label.
Well, yeah, there was, well, basically that was more of just this weird alignment where we just kind of put that on there because we were friends with them at the time. There was no
Yeah,
real wishing well label in terms of how we were on Green World,
right.
which we got through being friends with DI, because DI was on Green World, and their manager Jack Kerrigan hooked us up with
Okay.
Pete and Dean at Green World. So then they went under, and then Enigma ended up with it, and Chuck was helping us get it back. And then he started talking about, well, SST should just do it. We're like, well, we got a new record. And he's like, well, I think it could be cool. He goes, let me just check with Greg. And that show that it was Bad Brains, Dr. No, Bl'ast, and Gone was supposed to play. I think they ended up not playing, but they were at the show, and for some reason they didn't play. And because they had to get back to LA for another show or something. but
Mhm.
Greg Ginn was there, and we had a Ghetto Blaster recording of the song "It's in My Blood," and we played it for him out in the van, and he was just like, "Cool, let's do it," and we were just like, "Wow, we're on SST," and then they put out "It's in My Blood," and then they helped us get Power of Expression back, and then they re-released that. And then the Manic Ride was the last one, and we all came up with this. We had a great idea because we were like super into like Rat sound live. Dave Rat was like our favorite sound guy ever,
Mhm.
and so we discussed this idea with Greg and Chuck to like have him record it. And
I'm gonna go swimming.
okay,
Sorry.
see you later,
Just
Jenny.
locked
Thanks
up.
again. Say bye to Brian.
Sorry about that. Just have a good week.
Bye. Thank you.
But yeah, so we just decided that it would be a great idea, and Greg and Chuck agreed that like, yeah, let's get Dave Rat to record it. And had we done it at a studio down there with better engineers, I think it would have totally worked. But we did it at the same place that we did "It's in My Blood." And when we did "It's in My Blood," like there was an engineer named Ken Kraft that was there, that was in this band Snail, that was a rock band that was like a successful rock band from Santa Cruz that I grew up with. My mom worked for his dad, so I knew him. And I think that he was somehow objective enough. At that time, you couldn't just pull into like these kooky Santa Cruz studios where the producers were just in there like doing a bunch of coke and recording crappy bands and expect to get any kind of sound. You know, like the Fane recording was one thing because Vince was so on the level. But it's like the owner of this particular studio, Mars, was just kind of like, oh, this guy's kind of questionable. But
Sure.
then we had this great engineer that was, genuinely is like, he's like, okay, you guys are my ears. You just tell me how you want it to be. And I think he did a good job. And then when we went back there with Dave Rat, like he wasn't there. It was just this other like dipshit that like if you left anything in his hands, you'd like get to a certain point where something sounds good. You'd come back the next day and he's like, yeah, I kind of put, kind of fix this up a little bit. And you're just like, what the, get your fucking hands off that board, get out of here, like leave. Like it's insane,
So that's why the record ended up sounding the way it did, because he just kept meddling.
Well, it's just more like not so much of that, but if we would have had a good engineer that would have projected Dave's ideas, because he wasn't a studio guy, he was a live sound guy.
Right.
So basically, he was just kind of like, okay, well, wait a second, where's a real engineer? And it's like if we would have done it somewhere down south, like, with people that he knew and we all knew and stuff like that, I think it would have been way different, because
Sure.
they would have just translated his ideas instead of him trying to like fish it out of this board that he didn't really understand, so it just I remember there was a weird like kind of like part of the snare sound got lost, so they sort of like synthesized it. It was like this almost synthetic kind of weird reproduced snare sound. I mean, there was just a lot of like really weird things, that just a weird overall like compression or something that just keeps the sound really like
Over
from
here.
jumping out at you. Yeah. So it was weird. And it's like, we've even tried to remaster it and you just can't, I don't know. There's not a whole lot you could really do with it, but we're still trying. I mean, it'd be insane if we could re-record it, but which we have actually talked about doing. But I mean, I don't know. That would be a really interesting thing to try to do. But
Does Bill still play in Hawaii, right?
Bill's in Hawaii, yeah. And it's just
Kind of far away.
yeah. And it would just be like, yeah, I don't know if
I know
you
what you
know,
mean. I mean,
it would be
there's
hard to
always
play like that, And you talk about fast, like that album, like those songs like Bl'ast It Black, like started out so slow. And when we went into the studio, there was kind of a pissed off vibe. Everyone was just like agitated, and it was just kind of like rushed, and it like all those songs are played at like 3 times the speed that they were supposed to, like just super fast, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of, I don't know, there's just a weird intensity to the album. Like it's like the pissed offness and the, you know, and I remember just being like kind of traumatized afterwards, like, oh shit, now we gotta, you know, how are we gonna fix this? And then like you know, SST brought it. I think it was like guy from Painted Willie that, you know, remixed it and did whatever he could, and that kind of helped it out a little bit. But it was kind of just, you know, one of those records where when it got put out, it's just people just, first of all, the music was like just completely out of control and just beyond, like, you know, like we were always pushing the limits, like from Power of Expression to It's in My Blood, the limits got pushed. But then when the Manic Ride came out, it was just like, you could not touch this. There was nothing like it that ever existed on the planet.
And
It
it's
was
and there's a lot of there's a lot of music.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's just like it became a little bit too detached for people to grasp. I remember like the Flipside review, like I remember we had a feature interview in Flipside, and you know, and then you turn to the back of the magazine, and then there's this horrible review about how we're psychopaths and our psychopathic, you know, and we need to write more songs like The Power of Expression, and you know, Clifford's psycho attitude with his lyrics is really coming out, and it's sad. You know,
Psycho attitude.
I remember it was something like there's like they said that like the psychotic feeling behind this record is really disturbing, and they need to write more songs like The Power of Expression. And you know, it's just kind of like
It sounds
it
like
just
it's a compliment turning into an insult. Like, man, a psychotic presence on a record sounds like a pretty good endorsement to me.
yeah, it was just I think it was just a little too far out there for people at that time period. And even like Greg Ginn has said, he goes, yeah, he goes, despite the, you know, technical flaws in the recording process, he goes, man, he goes, that record, like to this day, has influenced so many bands because it just, you know, like the whole math rock thing, and like a lot of bands like that got into overly technical hardcore math rock, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, they kind of claim that as an influence, and it kind of set the basis for all that, you know,
Right. And
just kind of
Bill,
by accident. But
well, Bill added those rototoms too. That was, you know, was kind of different for sure.
yeah, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So, so Dave quit after you've recorded that before it came out?
Yeah, yep, it was like
So he was done.
yeah, and then we got Ron Issa from Social Unrest and Whipping Boy. He was like a good old friend of ours, and he's the guy that did the last tour with us.
Yeah.
Like that was the last time we came through Raleigh. I think we played like
Cat's Cradle.
that was Chapel Hill. I think we played the Fallout Shelter or something, or I
Well,
think it
if it
was
was
what used to be
Cat's
the
Cradle,
brewery or something.
you played at the brewery one time
Yeah.
with Dave Hill, then you came back another time with Ron and played in Chapel Hill.
Oh yeah.
So, and then
Yeah.
and then you guys eventually just were like, you guys, I guess, disbanded after a couple years after Manic Ride, or was it sooner than that?
Yeah, I think that what happened is like, you know, when I think about that time period, I think that, you know, kind of the college rock, like post-punk, like, you know, where basically SST was heading, and where just everything was heading, you know, where like there just wasn't, it's like hardcore was kind of dying out, and people were moving on to this, you know, more like college kind of rock and alternative style.
Things like Jane's Addiction. When Jane's Addiction got big, and that was slightly before when grunge happened, for lack of a better word, and after grunge
Yeah.
happened, when the new punk rock could sell lots of records and make a lot of money with this weird brand new thing that seemed to happen. And that was sort of, you guys breaking up was sort of at the tail end of all that stuff starting, I think. it was just like
And I think that what happened is like I was super influenced, you know, I was like really into all the other SST bands and loved being on that label. I love the Meat Puppets. I love Dinosaur Jr. You know, like You're Living All Over Me was like my favorite
oh yeah,
record ever. Sonic Husker Du, you know, and like, and I think we were even getting, you know, influenced by everything around us. We kind of lost our footage and was trying to just go with the flow, but it was like, you know, as we progressed into that realm, we were just losing a lot of our originality, and a lot of these newer ideas that we were coming up with just didn't really work and didn't really function as Bl'ast. And then it just got to a point where I just felt like there was too many outside influences, and you know, Nirvana being one of them. And like when the Caius record came out, it was just like, okay, now this is what everyone wants to sound like. And it just seemed like
you mean
we
blues
weren't going to make that progression into that from Bl'ast as a, you know, whatever you want to call us, a technical hardcore band or whatever we were, you know, we weren't going to make that progression into this new realm. It just wasn't going to sound right. It's like without changing the name, it just didn't seem like the right thing to do. And eventually I just got to a point where, I mean, I couldn't sing like that in any kind of like melodic way that would work with where the ideas were going. You know, those guys were getting frustrated with that, and like being the one that would have to, you know, talk to people and kick people out of the band. I just basically kicked myself out of the band, and it was just like, hey, this is where it's at. You know, I know what you guys want to say, and I know what you want to do. So being the dude that always is the one that does that, I'm just going to do it to myself. You know, like let's, you know, whatever. And then at that point, I was just kind of like, okay, wow, no, I'm not in Bl'ast anymore. And, you know, everyone's like, oh, you should make a new band like Bl'ast and like make it like the old stuff. And I'm like going, no, you know, I really don't want to do that. I want to be something, you know, do something that's totally different, like way different, but at the same time where I fit in, where it's heavy, it's crazy, it's technical, you know. And it's like, I don't know why I always end up in these like overly technical bands, because it just seems like, it almost seems like I'm the kind of person that will like, you know, can have enough of an understanding about it that I'll just be like, sure, I'll take that on, even though it's impossible or whatever. And like with Spaceboy, you know, they were like this crazy jam band, just insane, like outer space jazz thrash, like Slayer meets like Hawkwind and Pink
no,
Floyd and
that record's
outer
crazy.
space, and they take acid together, and this is what happened, you know. And nothing was ever really the same twice, you know, but we would luck out with some good recordings. But it was almost like, in some ways, you know, like if I have any regrets in Spaceboy, it was just almost like it was like singing for an instrumental band, you know, or trying to. And it's just like, and there was just certain parts that I should have just left alone, where a song would have so much momentum because I'd be singing to the right parts, and then I'd carry it into this other part, and I'd try to like pull it through the weird part and go, you know, with the weird jazzy crazy flow, and I just eventually just almost like visibly just like deteriorate within that, you know. But
Yeah,
but it's like, I thought that first, I liked all the records, I liked all the songs. I was just talking to Bill Blair last night about doing some more of that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And but it was just, you know, it was really kind of what I was looking for in terms of like, you know, departure from whatever the past. And it was like a really great experience. I mean, we were the kind of band where we would just play anywhere. We would like go up to Seattle to play 3 shows in some basements or something, and just get shows wherever we could and just not care. And just, you know, like I remember there was a review that said like Clifford's new like under ambitious band Spaceboy or something, you know, because we just like, we weren't like, it was kind of a miracle that we had 3 records come out, but we were basically, all we were about is just showing up somewhere and playing, you know, and just doing our thing. And that was always really fun.
yeah. I like that. That when that first record came out, I remember buying it and just going, "This record is fucking crazy," and yet this is sort of the perfect step for Clifford. What he should be a part of next, because it was nothing like what you had done in Bl'ast, and it was this crazy record, crazy cover. entertaining lyrics, especially that Planet of Pot song was really funny, you know. But you know, like it was cool stuff. How long did Spaceboy last?
10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, like the timing with our breakup was actually really bad because we were actually starting to kind of pull it together, and we you know, we put out that record on Southern Lord, the third one, and we went on tour with Fu Manchu
Yeah.
on that record, you know, touring on that record that had just come out, and things were starting to really look up, and you know, we were getting good shows, and you know, it was people were starting to acknowledge what we were doing and really get into it. And then all of a sudden, you know, we're on that the end of that last tour, and Jade and Adam, the bass player and drummer, who are totally irreplaceable, you know, were just like, well, we think it would help the band and be a great idea if we moved to Brooklyn. And we're just like, you know, and it was at a time period where it's like a lot of bands generally just weren't really doing that. It's not like, you know, the technology wasn't really available to function as a band like you could now. You could exchange songs and ideas and actually get stuff done still on a long distance level. But back then it was just kind of like, okay, you know. And then I remember, like, you know, Bill, our guitar player, getting really mad, really frustrated. And you know, and then breaking the news to like Greg Anderson, like that, like the whole timing of it was just so completely ridiculous. It was just like, really, you guys are going to do this now, you know, like why now, you know? And it's after Greg had just put all this time and money and energy into us doing this record, and then to like kind of break the news to him, well, okay, well, we're going to make this new band, me and Bill, like, you know, called Gargantula, and it's going to be a more stripped down version of Spaceboy. Have you ever heard that?
I don't think so.
I'll send you, I have a bunch of CDs. I'll send you a CD. I'll get your address and I'll send it to you. But it's definitely, there's some good stuff on it. But it was just kind of like, you know, it's like we didn't get signed off that band. It was just kind of, you know, it lasted for a while, and that lasted for a pretty long time too in various forms. And then we just broke up, and it was just kind of like,
Right.
kind of just, you know. And then, yeah, then there was the 2014, or like, I guess it started in 2013, like the new version of Bl'ast, where, you know, Mike was like, hey, here's what's going on. We're going to re-release these records and remix these records. And, you know, Southern Lord's going to put it out. And that's when he was like, you know, should do some live shows, you know. I was like, wow, okay, that sounds great. And so we did that. And then we ended up with Nick and Joey, and played a lot of really great shows. And it was actually really fun, you know, and we felt like we brought it back on a level that wasn't like our main concern is just not, you know, it's better to let the legacy live on, you know, and keep the mystery and the mystique of what it was really like back then than to come back and like do it half-ass and like play with half the energy and, you know, just be, you know, totally different than we were at that time. And we were just like, no, we're going to play these songs, we're going to do it right, you know. And we recruited guys that were actually there, that knew our sound, that had seen us, you know, back in the day. Like we were friends with Joey, Wasted Youth would play shows together, and he was, you know, a friend and a fan. And it's like basically they knew what it took to do it right, you know, and it was really fun.
Yeah. And there might be more of that in the future, but you don't know. Well, obviously with the pandemic, but is a possibility of more activity.
Yeah, there's songs that are there, and it's, you know, like those guys were starting to work on stuff. And now I think that with this pandemic thing, like one of the things that threw a wrench into it is like the homeschool thing, you know, where, you know, Mike was driving out to the desert and jamming, and I guess stuff was really starting to come together. And now it's hard because, you know, with the kids, Joey's kids and Mike's kids, you know, Mike having to drive out to the desert. I mean, I haven't kept in touch with them. The last I heard, they were going to fire it up again. And then I've heard the songs, like the guitar tracks, and it's incredible stuff. It is totally like the kind of stuff where you just, and even like Joey, when I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, it's total Bl'ast. I mean, it's just like the best of Bl'ast, like the best of all the eras, with sort of but just a lot of the classic like build-ups and like hair pulling out of your head kind of tension, and just a lot of opportunity to really kind of recreate that original sound.
Mhm.
And it's like, I mean, I'm excited about doing it, and I'm just kind of waiting for the heads up to go down there and do it.
Pandemic. And lastly, we're gonna, I guess, conclude with your musical history with Seized Up, which is the newest band that you are in, that you've worked on with these three other guys for a couple of years, I think. I could be wrong. And your album just came out. What was the process of being asked to play with those guys? And tell us a little bit about Seized Up and the album that you just put out.
Well, there's a band called Fast Asleep that Chuck and Danny were in, and Andy, our drummer, was the original drummer for Fast Asleep. And I guess like something happened where it didn't, they didn't want to do it together or something. So then they got other drummers, and they turned more kind of grindcore-ish, kind of, a little different than what the original intention was with Andy. And then over the years, like the more I saw them, the more they became one of my favorite bands, to the point where I was almost starting, kind of joke around like, hey, if you guys ever have a sore throat or something, want me to sing or something, And then it was like their last show, and they're just like, hey, we need to talk to you after this show, like hang out. And then so after the show, which was incredible, I was like, wow, that was, great and stuff. And then they're like, we want to make a new band. Our drummer's leaving, Fast Asleep is done, but we want to make a new band with us two and have you sing, and we'll find a good drummer. And then luckily, I mean, the first person they thought of was just like, well, let's talk to Andy, because he was the original drummer and he was into it. And that's where it really took off. Like if we would have had to struggle to find a drummer that could be as good as him, it wouldn't have happened in the same way,
Yeah.
And it was just like perfect. And then, I ended up with some like a health scare where I had to have a little bit of chemo and radiation. They found something early and caught it, but it was still, like some downtime where I was just like, shoot, sorry guys, I'm not going to be able to do it. And they're just like, we'll wait, and that really means a lot to me, that they're like, okay, we'll wait, And so they did. And then, before I was even I like I said, they caught it early, everything was fine, but that stuff really sucks the life out of you for a while, like the radiation and all that stuff, and just being, like Vicodin and stuff, and just kind of like the whole vibe of that thing. It's like you're just not going to really get anything done. And then I started going to the practices and just sitting there and hearing these songs that are on the record, and got to a point where they're, why don't you just try singing, and just kind of faking it and just coming up with the feeling, and basically just singing like stuff that was similar but just not the real words, and kind of stumbling upon how it was going to be. And it really helped the healing process, I think, too, because before I was doing anything like physical or anything like that, I was going to practice with them and doing these like 2-hour sets. So it really helped like me regain my strength and kind of get back into the real world. And then these songs started happening, and then we started talking about recording them. And our friend Jesse LeBlanc would come and do these pre-recordings for me to write to, which were really good versions of the songs and really easy, like to just, get on CD and take it home. And just like what I would like to do is put stuff on cassette. So like when I get super familiar with the songs, I could just attack part by part, just be like, yeah, this whole song rips, but I'm not going to listen to this next part until I finish this part, you know, and it kind of speeds up the writing process. And then we actually recorded the record a year ago, like I think it was late October, early November. And then you know, that was a great experience. You know, we went in there really well rehearsed and just kind of ready to do it. And we went in there and did our thing. And the producer, Paul Miner, was really, he had gotten these other recordings of our songs. So he knew the words, he knew the parts, you know. So it was just kind of an easy process to go in there and just lay it down. We did it all in 3 days. Like Andy was on tour with the Distillers and he had a day off. So the first day that we got there, we picked him up at his hotel, drove to the studio, and he did all 11 songs in 1 day because he didn't have a choice.
Right.
And he was able to pull all that off. And then, you know, the next 2 days, we just did everything. And we didn't do a whole lot of mixing. We trusted Paul to just kind of do it after we were gone. And it went great. I really like the way it turned out. It's called Brace Yourself. Actually, I have it right here.
Here it is.
It's out on Pirates Press. And yeah, if you like hardcore, check it out. Or just, you know, I mean, there's a lot more elements than that too, but primarily hardcore is a good one. We just recorded 3 new songs for a 7-inch that'll be out soon. And now we're working on another record that we're trying to have out by next summer. So
cool. Yeah, it's a cool record. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for setting me up with that link. Actually, Danny also helped me too. But it's a cool record. It definitely reminds me of what I liked about our formative musical time period without sounding like anything in particular. And the lyrics are very timely, it seems like. So
yeah, they definitely seem kind of appropriate for the times and help kind of you know, alleviate a little bit of the frustration, or it's kind of a good outlet. It would be a better outlet because regardless of the pandemic, you know, being here or not, it's still completely fucked up times. And then you throw that wrench into it, you know, which sucks, especially with the timing of having this record. And, you know, we get signed and we're like, oh no, now they're not going to put it out. But Pirates Press has been really cool. And they're just like, don't worry, this record is going to come out, you know, despite all this crap. And you know, we got to play 3 shows that were awesome, but I mean, we're looking forward to playing more, you know.
definitely. Yeah. I think when this is all over, I can't help but feel like there's going to be this massive outpouring of stuff for sure.
Definitely. Everyone's going to be, yeah.
Maybe
That's
people will be nicer to each other. Who knows?
Yeah, it'd be cool too, because like with the internet and this whole era, like people kind of being able to experience things on a virtual level and be like, I've seen this band online. I don't have to go see them or whatever. It's like, I think it's gonna, you know, it kind of created a thing where maybe people were starting to take stuff for granted and not appreciate or go to shows as much, you know? And I think when it's all said and done, it's like people are gonna be like, hell yeah, like, you know, get it while it's there, because you never know when something like this could happen again. And it's just like, I mean, you have to appreciate live music for what it is. There's no substitute for it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no substitute to going to a show and seeing a band that you like and getting that live energy and get the whole live experience, you know, like no matter how you try to simulate stuff or stream it or do whatever, it's nowhere near the same effect.
Sure, definitely.